Okay, we're going to be looking at exponents here and powers. So our essential question is, how can we use exponents to write numbers? So some information that you should have ahead of time. It says the expression 3 to the 5th is called a power. The base is 3 and the exponent is 5. So if we look at this 3 to the 5th here, we can see the bigger number that's written is the base, and the little number to the top right is the exponent. And remember, 3 to the 5th would be 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, it is not 3 times 5. In example 1 here, we're going to write expressions using exponents. So you have the expanded form, and we're going to write it with an exponent. So it says write each product using exponent. For A, I see that -7 is being multiplied by itself 3 times. So when I go to write with an exponent, I need to put -7 in parentheses, and we'll talk in a little bit why these parentheses are super important, and then to the 3rd power. Okay, so my base is -7, my exponent is 3. B, I have pi times r times r times r. Remember, pi is just 3.14. We're going to keep it as the pi symbol. So pi times pi, that's pi times itself 2 times. So I'll write pi squared. And then r times itself 3 times. So I'll write r to the 3rd power. Couple more examples. I have 1/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So I'm going to put 1/4, and I'm going to put that in parentheses because I want that whole fraction to the 5th power. Sometimes if you don't put the parentheses, it looks like you're just putting 1 to the 5th divided by 4. So make sure you put the fraction in parentheses. And then number 2, -2 times -2. So that's -2 in parentheses to the 2nd power, and then x is x times x times x, so 3 times. So I'd have x to the 3rd power. Okay, and one thing I really want to point out to clear up any misconceptions here, x times x times x is not 3x. Okay, it is x to the 3rd. So make sure you don't write it like this. That would be 3 times x. Okay, for example 2, we're going to evaluate expressions. So if you're kind of wondering, what does evaluate mean? Look at the word value inside of evaluate. It just means find the value of what it equals. So for A, I have -2 to the 4th power. So that means I'm going to take -2 and multiply it by itself 4 times. So I have -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. Then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Okay, I could easily punch this in my calculator, -2 times -2 times -2, and so on. Or I could split it up into 2 different parts. -2 times -2 is +4. And then this one, -2 times -2 is +4. And when I multiply these two together, I have 4 times 4, which is 16. Okay, now if I look at B here, I have -2 to the 4th power. Now this, you might be thinking, doesn't look much different than A, but you'll actually see how it is different. Notice there's no parentheses around the -2, so that's super important. So one thing you need to recognize here is that we have to actually follow order of operations. So that's PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So this parentheses exponents is a really big deal here. So when I look at -2 to the 4th, it really implies that I'm taking a negative number, -1, times 2 to the 4th power. Then when I follow PEMDAS, this is multiplication, -1 times 2, and 2 to the 4th is exponents. So I have to do my exponents first, 2 to the 4th, and I'll take care of the -1 multiplying by -1 later. So I do 2 to the 4th first. So I start with 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, because that's 2 to the 4th. And I'm going to put parentheses around it to show that I'm doing this first. And then I'm going to throw the negative out front because I'm going to take care of that at the end. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, well 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So I know this is 16. And then I bring down this negative at the end. So what you need to know is if there's a negative out front without parentheses, just always add it in on the end. So you can go ahead and take a second to write this down. If there's a negative symbol without parentheses, add on the negative at the end. Okay, and for our last example, C, I have 1/4 to the third power. So that means I'm going to do 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4. Okay, if you remember multiplying fractions, you go straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So numerator 1 times 1 times 1 is just 1. And denominator 4 times 4 times 4, you can use your calculator. 4 times 4 times 4 equals 64. So it's 1/64. Okay, for example D, we're multiplying -3 because the negative is in parentheses. It's with a 3, -3 by itself 3 times. So -3 times -3 times -3. Okay, if I take a look at this, -3 times -3, that's +9 times -3 right here would be -27. Okay, you could type in a calculator, -3 times -3 times -3. For E, notice the negative is not in parentheses, so I'm going to do 3 squared, 3 to the second power first. So I have 3 times 3, which I know is 9. And then notice we have that negative symbol out front. That just means throw it onto your answer in the end. So notice we did not do -3 times -3 because the negative is not with the 3 in parentheses. And then for F, -2/3 times to the fourth power. So -2/3 is going to be multiplied 4 times by itself. So I have -2/3 times -2/3 times -2/3 times -2/3. Okay, to start with, I'm going to ignore the negatives out front. I'll figure out if my answer is positive or negative at the very end. And I'm just going to multiply the 2's on the top. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So I know the numerator equals 16. The denominator, I have 3 times 3, which is 9, times 3, which is 27, times 3, which is 81. So my denominator is 81. Okay, now to look at the symbol, I have a negative times a negative times a negative times a negative. Well, if I take these first two fractions here, -2/3 times -2/3, I know that's going to be a positive answer. And then if I look at the second two, -2/3 times -2/3, that's a positive answer. So a positive times a positive will give me a positive. And you can sneak the positive in there, but no, you do not have to have that symbol there. So leave it or don't. Okay, on example 3, it says, using the order of operations, evaluate each expression. Remember, evaluate means find the value of it. With order of operations, we have to remember PEMDAS. So parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, left and right, add, subtract from left to right. So for A, we have 3 plus 2 times 3 to the fourth. So exponents comes before multiplying or adding. So first I'm going to figure out 3 to the fourth. And you're welcome to use a calculator. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 is 81. So that part's 81. Then I'm going to bring the rest of the problem down. The most mistakes happen is when you are not organized with your work. So do one step at a time and bring everything else down. So I brought down the 3 plus the 2 times the 81. Now, order of operations tells me I need to do 2 times 81 and then add 3. Multiply comes before adding. So 2 times 81, that's 162. And then bring down the plus 3. And 3 plus 162 is 165. So the value of that expression is 165. Okay, for b, I have 3 to the third, so there's an exponent, minus 8 squared, there's another exponent, divided by 2. So first I'm going to take care of these exponents, 3 to the third and 8 to the second. So 3 to the third is 3 times 3, which is 9, times 3, which is 27. 8 squared is 8 times 8, which is 64. Now bring everything else down. So bring down the minus and the divide by 2. Okay, now I'm going to divide before subtracting. So negative 64, I'm treating this minus with the 64. So negative 64 divided by 2 is negative 32. Then I'll bring down the 27 out front. And 27 minus 32 is negative 5. Okay, last one, C. Now, these bars on the beginning and the end of the expression means absolute value, and that's the distance from 0, which is always a positive number. So on the inside, first, though, we have 5 plus 6 squared divided by 4. So first, exponents, I'm going to do 6 squared. 6 times 6 is 36. Bring everything else down, divided by 4, 5 plus. Okay, now I need to do this division before I do the plus. And I'll put my absolute value symbols there. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. Bring down the plus 5. My absolute value bars. 5 plus 9 is 14. And the absolute value of 14, well, 14 is 14 spots away from 0. So the absolute value of 14 is positive 14. Okay, the next ones. 3, 4, 5, and 6, you're going to attempt on your own. So go ahead, do 3, 4, 5, and 6. Push pause, work through those 4. When you're done, push play, and you'll be able to check your work. Okay, for checking your work for number 3, I have negative 5 to the 4th. So remember, the negative is not in parentheses there, so you're going to multiply 5. You should have multiplied 5 by itself 4 times. Okay, positive 5, and that is 625. And then the negative is out front, so you just throw the negative on at the end because it's not in parentheses with the 5. Number 4, you did negative 1, 6 times negative 1, 6 times negative 1, 6. Okay, and if I just look at the numbers first and then I'll look at the signs, the numerator 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, and the denominator 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. And then for the signs, the first two fractions, a negative times a negative, multiply to be a positive, and then I multiply it by this last negative fraction. I multiply it by the last negative fraction there, so my answer is negative. Okay, and then checking number 5 and 6. For number 5, I have the absolute value of negative 3 to the third power divided by 27. So first of all, remember, negative 3 to the third power. You do 3 to the third power, which is 27, and throw the negative on at the end because it's not in parentheses. Then bring down divided by 27 and the absolute value of that. So negative 27 divided by 27 is negative 1. And then the absolute value of negative 1 is just 1 because negative 1 is 1 spot away from 0. So the answer to number 5 is 1. And number 6, 9 minus 2 to the 5th times a half, 0.5. So I'm going to do 2 to the 5th first. 2 to the 5th was 32. Bring everything else down. So 9 minus 32 times 0.5. And then I need to multiply before subtracting. So 32 times 0.5 is 16. Bring everything else down. 9 minus 16 then is negative 7. So number 6 is -7.